Hi everybody, and welcome to class for this week. Sort of getting back to our book here, Rob Preece's book, Psychology of Buddhist Tantra, and sort of the chapter of sort of getting into the process, alchemical process of Tantra, and how Jungian psychotherapy can sort of help provide good analogies, metaphors, and examples for our Buddhist Tantric practice. So today I'm actually combining into one class two, because they're interrelated, two chapters in the book, one on the body and one on subtle energies, or chi, prana, or lung, as they call it, by sort of different names, because they both go together. And so I thought it would be good to talk about them in the same class. So I'd like to maybe not do as much meditation today, only because it'll probably end up being a long class with a lot of the details and sort of issues I'd like to extrapolate on. Again, I see this as just obviously an introduction, because the issue of the body, the human body in Buddhism, and in particular in Tantra, is an absolutely enormous discussion and just a huge topic. And then discussion of subtle energies, chi, prana, lung, lung meaning wind, or sort of the felt energy in tantric practice, is, again, an enormous topic. And then if you bring them both together, the body and chi or prana, sort of how that body manifests, or energies, again, that's an even bigger topic. So I see this class today as, again, just like everything I'm presenting, just a way of introducing these topics and these issues, and these ideas, and that, again, this would, for the audience here, the people watching the video, this can spark sort of an introduction for further research and reading and learning and education you'd like to do sort of on your own time, and exploring Tantra, Buddhist Tantra, and spiritual traditions that have this in them. Issues, all spiritual traditions, of course, have relationships to the body, but in particular, Tantra, Qigong, shamanism, different magical traditions work with subtle energies. So it's a good introduction to that, and it's just an enormous continent of knowledge to explore. So of course, I'm just literally tipping my finger into this vast ocean of knowledge. And again, just sort of getting interested in to do your own research, and most of all, your own experience through this. One of the reasons I'm not going to talk about this too much is because it is like reading books about sports, reading books about, my dad was sort of he never mountain climbed, but he loved reading books on mountain climbing, books on martial arts, even books on sex. I mean, that's all great. But I would think that it's much better to actually have an experience of these things, to do these things, rather than just read books on them. So when, in particular, issues of embodiment, it's better to do things with your body to figure out how they work. So you can read books about how to swim and watch videos, but again, jump in the pool and learn how to swim. In terms of subtle energies, you have to actually do the exercises to feel these things. Again, you can have all the book knowledge and intellectual knowledge about pranayama and so forth, but for even Tantra in this regard, but you have to actually do the practices to get the knowledge and the results, and reading only goes so far. So in that case, this is one of the other sort of prescriptive reasons I'm doing this class and keeping a little bit shorter, more introductory, is to whet your appetite, that you actually go out there and do these things for yourself in your own personal life, in your own experiential life. Okay, let's get started here with the Heart Sutra. Homage to perfection, wisdom, the Blessed Mother. Thus I have heard, at one time the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajgir in Mass Vulture's Mountain, great assembly of monks and nuns, and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. That time the Blessed One was absorbed in the concentration of countless aspects of phenomena called profound illumination. That time also Superior Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, was looking perfectly at the prize of profound perfection wisdom, looking perfectly also at the five aggregates being empty of inherent existence. Then the power Buddha, Venerable Shariputra, said to Superior Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, how should a son of the lineage train who wishes to engage with the prize of profound perfection wisdom? Thus he spoke, and Superior Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, replied to Venerable Shariputra as follows. Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of the lineage wishes to engage the prize of profound perfection wisdom should look perfectly like this. Subsequently, looking perfectly and correctly also the five aggregates being empty of inherent existence. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form is not other than emptiness. Likewise, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Should I put it like this? All phenomena are emptiness, having no characteristics. Not produce and do not cease. They have no defilement, no separation from defilement. They have no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, and no consciousness. There is no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mentality, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no tactile object, no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so forth, up to no mentality element, and also up to no element of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance and no exhaustion of ignorance, and so forth, up to no aging and death, no exhaustion of aging and death. Likewise, there is no suffering, origin, cessation, or path, no exalted awareness. No attainment, also no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on divine the perfection of wisdom. Their minds have no obstructions and no fear. Passing utterly beyond perversity, they attain the final nirvana. Also, all Buddhas reside perfectly in the three times, having relied upon the perfection of wisdom, became manifest complete Buddhas in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the equal to the unequal mantra, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, since it's not false, should be known as the truth. The mantra of perfection of wisdom is proclaimed, Tayata, Om Gata Gata Paragata Parasamgati Bodhisoha. Shariputra, Bodhisattva, great beings should train the profound perfection of wisdom like this. Then the Blessed One arose in that concentration and said to Spirit Balakshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being that had spoken well. Good, O son of Lynch, it's like that. Since it's like that, just as you have revealed, in that way the profound perfection of wisdom should be practiced, and the Devagatas will also rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the noble Shariputra, Spirit Balakshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, the entire circle of disciples, as well as worldly beings, gods, humans, demigods, and spirits, were delighted and highly praised what had been spoken by the Blessed One. Okay, with that, we can just take a moment to, again, just sit ourselves here for sort of brief meditation and feel that we're seated in a wide open space here, ground blue like lapis lazuli, smooth and warm to the touch, comfortable to sit on. And we are surrounded by all sentient beings, the six realms, with our mother on our left, father on our right, people we love the most behind us as support, people we like the least or have issues with in front of us, as objects of compassion, love, and healing. And moving sort of outwards in concentric circles. You just feel people from all over the world, all the natural beings from the natural ecosystem, animals and insects, birds and fish, and so forth. Countless spirit beings from the spirit world, and celestial beings from the god and demigod realm, and countless beings in lower states of rebirth like the hungry ghost realm and hell realms, that we're all here together as a big family meditating here together. Yeah, beautiful blue sky above us without a cloud, very luminous, beautiful blue sky. And in it, we're just going to visualize Buddha Shakyamuni's higher form, his Sambhogakaya, or beatific body or angelic body, Conqueror Vajradhara. We'll just have him just sort of floating in space here in the sky, made out of blue energy, like sapphire blue, in lotus position, his arms cross his heart, with a crown, beautiful jewelry, and silk clothes, and he has a bell in his left hand and a diamond scepter or Vajra Dorje in his right. And we can always visualize too a beautiful hum letter, H-U-M in English, or just the Sanskrit or Tibetan letter, for that vibration representing the enlightened mind, Dharmakaya mind of the Buddhas. So taking refuge from our hearts here, I and all sentient beings, until we achieve enlightenment, go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I and all sentient beings, to achieve enlightenment, go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I and all sentient beings, to achieve enlightenment, go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Through the virtues we collect by giving and other perfections, may we become a Buddha for the benefit of all. Through the virtues we collect by giving and other perfections, may we become a Buddha for the benefit of all. Through the virtues we collect by giving and other perfections, may we become a Buddha for the benefit of all. So generating refuge in our hearts, refuge in the three jewels, and again the Buddha jewel, Buddha as our doctor, Sangha as the nurses and EMTs and so forth, staff at the hospital, and the medicine for our suffering and unhappiness and confusion and ignorance is the Dharma jewel. So really taking refuge in that, knowing that we don't want to suffer, and so fear of that suffering sort of allows us to move in the safe direction of taking refuge or looking to this medicine for help, medicine of the Dharma. And it's setting our intention being that everything we do here together in our sort of study and practice along the path be put to the enlightenment of all sentient beings without exception. May we become a Buddha, that we help make all other beings Buddha as well, that we help them self-educate and self-manifest as the Buddhas they truly are. Okay, so generating the four measurables. May everyone be happy. May everyone be free from misery. May no one ever be separated from their happiness. And may everyone have equanimity, free from hatred and attachment. So again, just feeling that that is generating immeasurable love, wanting all beings to be happy. Immeasurable compassion, not wanting them to suffer. Immeasurable joy, which is the happiness and freedom and positive power of enlightenment. And immeasurable equanimity, sort of this sort of balanced, moderate, beyond extremes way of living, which is open and friendly to all beings. I was saying the 7-limb prayer just for to make this practice a Buddhist one, for prostrations, offering, confession, rejoicing, asking Buddhas and holy beings to stay, to teach, and then dedication for everything to the enlightenment of all. With my body, speech, and mind humbly I prostrate. I make offerings both set out and imagine. I confess my wrong deeds from all time and rejoice in the virtues of all. Please stay until samsara ceases and turn the wheel of Dharma for us. I dedicate all virtues to great enlightenment. Now finally opening our heart up with a mandala offering here. Generosity of offering a beautiful, purified universe to the 3 jewels here. The ground sprinkled with perfume and spread with flowers, the great mountain, 4 lands, sun and moon, seen as a Buddha land and offered thus, may all beings enjoy such Buddha lands. Send forth this jewel mandala to you, precious teachers. Om Edam Guru Radha Mandalakam Tiyami. So having made prayers and requests here, just visualize it for this beautiful blue light softly raining down here. This glowing, shining forth on us and all sentient beings around us. Purifying our minds, making them sort of light and luminous and giving us positive spiritual energy here. To study and practice the Dharma. And we can request, Buddha Vajradhara, please grant us your blessings of body, speech, and mind, you whose mind is synthesis of all body, synthesis of all Buddha jewels. Speech is a synthesis of all Dharma jewels, and whose mind is a synthesis. Sorry, I was going to give you body is the synthesis of all Sangha jewels. Speech is the synthesis of all Dharma jewels, and your mind, the Dharmakaya mind, is synthesis of all Buddha jewels. The Buddha jewel of the enlightened mind, and the seat mind, which is seeing emptiness directly. So now please grant us your blessings of body, speech, and mind. With this Buddha Vajradhara, it's very, very small, into like a little blue diamond or blue sapphire, a piece of blue lapis, radiating blue light. And that he is the 3 jewels and the synthesis of all of our teachers and all holy beings, all Buddhas and light beings. And he comes to the crown of our head. It's like a falling star, but quite slow and gentle. Enters our crown chakra and then descends to our heart. Once he gets to our heart, he melts directly into our mind there. just a great sense of spaciousness here. Says Vajradhara's mind merges into ours. Spaciousness, awakeness, luminosity, openness, love, and compassion. Okay, so coming out of meditation now, and just bringing this sort of openness and luminosity into our class today. Okay, so the book here, let's pull it out of the little bookshelf here, Psychology of Buddhist Tantra by Rob Preece. And again, the chapters we're looking at today. So part 2 is called The Vessel. That's the second part. And we're looking at a chapter called The Body in Tantra, and then after that, Nature of Subtle Energy. So chapter 7 and chapter 8. Okay, let me just put my glasses on here. So I think it's good because, of course, Robert Preece is a Western English Caucasian writer and teacher. He grew up in our very Western European Judeo-Christian society as a background, so he's very aware of people from this background, the kind of cultural foundation that we have here, and dealing with spirituals around the body and the mind. So the Judeo-Christian culture of the West really is defined by dualism of body and mind, or body and spirit. And this goes right back, if you ever do go into religious studies, theology, or philosophy, or so forth, even Western sort of history of Western ideas and culture, you're going to get into this starting. This is the big, get started here, but this is the big, creation of Western culture you get, which is the transition from the Hellenistic Greco-Roman period into the Christian period. And one of my favorite philosophers, Albert Camus, did his, I think it was his master's in philosophy and Neoplatonism, and that was, he said, was the most, just like Nietzsche said, the most important change of values and ideas and views, whole worldview, whole symbolic universe, is the transition from the Greek to the Christian world in the first few centuries of the what they call Common Era, or AD, after the death of Christ. So what's interesting, you could even see this with a lot of, even Western philosophy, Pierre Hadot, Michel Foucault's famous books from the late 70s, early 80s on history of sexuality in the West. A lot of people have written about this, feminists and philosophers and so forth. But you have a big switch or changeover in the concept of the body from the Greco-Roman world into the Christian world. And what we get, in particular, the influence of Christianity, Judaism, Neoplatonism, and so forth, certain philosophical strands within the Greco-Roman world that then get recast, refitted, changed around with Jewish values that form the basis, the Abrahamic values and Semitic values, found the base of Christianity. A very strong dualistic split, again, between mind and body, or body and spirit. There was not this split before in Greco-Roman culture. in particular Greek culture. So it's a huge, huge change of values and ideas. And this is exacerbated in the modern period at the rise of modern science, in particular the Cartesian period of the 1700s, where quite literally you have a split between mind and body. It's still, to this day, as much as no one would call themselves Cartesians in a philosophical sense, we've inherited that culture and sort of sediment or foundation, what famous English philosopher Gilbert Ryle in his book Concept of Mind called the ghost in the machine, sort of the immaterial, pure spiritual body or spirit that's somehow encased or in sort of either, you look at a prison or sort of machine of the body, which is material that we can study. So you have sort of an animating spirit and then a dead sort of machine of matter. So this is, whether you want to admit it or not, whether you're reacting against it or not, this is the foundation of our Western cultures, about 2,000 years of that here. And what Rob Preece is that even in Asian cultures or South Asian cultures, Hindu and Buddhist worlds, there are these kinds of issues as well. Of course, it's not sort of cartoon in the sense that the West has it all wrong and other cultures have it all right. But there's a split in, let's say, Hindu and Buddhist traditions between sort of an esoteric and exoteric approaches, sort of an inner and outer public and more private or esoteric or secret traditions or practices of in teachings. And so, you know, you have that view where even in sort of Buddhist or Hindu culture, you can have this where the body is seen as a foundation of suffering and it must be overcome. So we, of course, get that in Christianity. If you look at a lot of Christian sects, or maybe all of them to a certain degree, have the idea of original sin. The original sin, in a lot of ways, is the fact that we have been incarnated in body with sexual urges, instinctual urges, and desires, and so forth. And this has to be redeemed, overcome, transcend in some way, in that our true personhood, or true, let's say, Christian soul in particular, is one that has transcended or purified of all these things. Now, of course, there are sort of more sort of hedonistic, libertarian, maybe more in a negative way, as well as sort of mystical traditions within Judaism, Christianity, and Islam that don't follow that regime, that are far more embodied, that have positive views of sex, seeing sex as sort of the body as a vehicle for spiritual truths and so forth. So I'm just talking about a lay, common sense version, sort of maybe a little bit of a cartoon sense of our Judeo-Christian culture. But even within Buddhism and Hinduism, you have this idea, especially in Buddhism, in the more sutric teachings, that the body is something to be renounced. Even in Lam Rim, we get this, where we see in the intermediate state of Lam Rim, or the graduated path to enlightenment, you end up identifying the source of samsara. What samsara is uncontrolled rebirth in 5 contaminated aggregates. So uncontrolled rebirth, or an uncontrolled embodiment within an organic body that is born, starts to get old, break down, get sick, and then eventually falls apart. And then the process is renews itself or sort of starts over again. And it's what samsara is. You reincarnate again in this sort of organic, uncontrolled condition. And so the mind, which is basically, you could say, immaterial and immortal, is what you have to work with to reach full enlightenment. So that form of renunciation, renouncing the body. And so even in Buddhism, renouncing attachment to things like food and sex and so forth, it's always preached sort of, or taught in a moderate middle way. But you can see even culturally sometimes, even within Buddhist communities, these things are seen as sort of sinful or bad things that have to be abandoned, right? But there are, of course, traditions that in Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and so forth, and a lot of Asian traditions, where the body and its elemental energies it's the fundamental vitality of these energies and embodiment are the path, or sort of the guiding light of our spiritual life. So there's 2 views here, sort of a culture Puritanism that sees the body as something to be overcome, And then sort of times of renaissance within these traditions, when yogic teachings and more sort of embodied teachings flourish, where the vital energies of sexuality and eroticism are seen as a path to enlightenment. So there's always this sort of, throughout the history of these traditions, times of conservatism and times of liberality, Renaissance, or sometimes even libertinism, where these sort of more esoteric mystical paths of the human body being the path to enlightenment are sort of celebrated and exalted and taught. So our Western culture elevates the spirit, the mind, and the intellect over the body with its instinctual impulses, emotional turmoil. And in this case, as Jung would say, what we've done, I mean, Freud was one of the first to really talk about this. Nietzsche talks about it too. 19th century is, of course, a big Western movements in Western thought and culture sort of showing this, is that when we renounce the body in this way and repress it, we form a shadow side where these vital energies and instincts and desires end up sort of haunting us as an unconscious, right? So in Christianity, the body with its sexual needs, bodily function, is oftentimes seen as a devil or sort of a demonic presence, source of all earthly imperfections, temptation, sins of the flesh, as they say. What happens that people sort of believe in this viewpoint, then they end up being sort of possessed a lot by a lot of shame, dislike, and guilt for their body, their desires, and their instincts. And so a lot of times become disassociated for these things. And we see these even in the Buddhist community. And of course, as Western Buddhists coming from a Judeo-Christian background, even if you're not brought up religious in these traditions, our culture has these values. People bring in this shame and guilt into their Buddhist practice, or their confusion around the body and sexuality and bodily needs. So, I mean, myself, I've heard it, of course, just spending over 30 years in the Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist community. There's a lot of confusion and ambiguity and ignorance, conflict, all sorts of problems around these issues, around sex, around attachment to even food or the body, in that there's these things are seen somehow as a source of error, ignorance, suffering, and so forth, but in a very unskilled way, right? Like somehow the more renounced you are of these things, even among tantric practitioners, the more you don't want to eat, the more you never want to have sex, the more that you're beyond all these things and becoming this sort of disembodied angel. You're seen as more of a pure, better person, that anyone else that's doing these things somehow doesn't cut it as a practitioner. I mean, we see this all the time. So one of the big things you get in Buddhist sutras is the idea that these needs, instincts, and impulses are uncontrolled, and there's a lot of attachment associated with them, hence they drive you into suffering. And in particular, as always, as any feminist will tell you, that the main target of this is the woman's body, because the woman's body for men is the source of temptation, sexual attraction, but also in cultures, specifically Abrahamic cultures, this is something that's unclean, because women have periods, women have children, these kinds of things. And so, and also women can be, very emotional, or all these kinds of bad stereotypes and sort of patriarchal and phallocentric views on women, right? And even in Buddhist cultures, you get this in Asian cultures, sort of a lot of patriarchal and phallocentric superstitions and sort of wrong views and bad power structures against women and their bodies, trying to control female reproduction, sexuality, and so forth. It's a big thing in Christian, a lot of Christian traditions, where it's sort of this lowest form of male masculinity, that it's, Eve tempting Adam, that the female body, female sexuality, it's what's responsible for all the evil from our sort of being thrown out of Eden, but also the male descent from a purified, sort of mystical, desireless state, being sort of pulled down into matter, into error, into dualism, into dirt, into filth, into mortality, into suffering, because of a woman's body, because of a woman's sexuality, right? And so this is something to be renounced, and sort of this idea that sort of the femme fatale, or sort of the evil demoness woman, has to be cast out even in my own mind. People believe this, and these kinds of sort of views haunt spirituality in the world. These kind of wrong views, right? It's kind of interesting that way. And of course, obviously, very sad. But that's so the women's body, in particular, women's sexuality gets targeted by this, right? So what Rob Preece says, of course, from a Jungian point of view, is the spiritual approach that emphasizes denial of the body potentially reinforces this dualistic split between mind and body, or body and spirit, by deepening guilt and confusion in relation to the body and its instinctual needs, especially sex. Bodily needs and ailments become seen as obstacles, okay, ones to be sort of endured at the very least, or eventually overcome on our spiritual path to liberation. So we got beyond the limits and demands of our physical and emotional life. These things are to be controlled and repressed, by our spiritual practice. And, that sort of bad stoicism, so to speak, is to be somehow seen as a virtue or something you should be rewarded for, right? So what happens, of course, is when you repress, like any good psychoanalyst will tell you, or any sort of good therapist will tell you, when you repress these emotional, instinctive drives or energies, impulses within you, they don't dissipate and disappear. Rather, they just get buried in the body and the unconscious. So Jung wrote a lot about that, saying that our body, or a form of embodiment, really is a form of our unconscious. And this is, I studied for years with my teacher, therapeutic Qigong, and this is one of the big things they teach in Taoism, in sort of the tradition of therapeutic Qigong. I studied at Qinat San, so which is like an internal organs energy massage, is it ends up showing you that any emotional, psychic, psychological, feelings, emotions, thoughts that don't get properly, quote unquote, digested or properly moved in your body, transformed and released, end up getting stuck. And if they stop moving and get stuck in your body, they stop transforming, you stop growing. And then when you're no longer transforming and growing, these energies that become sort of stuck, they become responsible for disease. The sort of the qi ends up sort of becoming stale and sort of dying, so to speak. So these blockages of emotional, psychic, psychological energy, our feelings in our body around these things, ends up becoming a source of disease, but also a source of sort of, like Jung would say, our shadow side, very, very negative emotions, guilt, shame, anger, fear, anxiety, worry, depression, all these, all these emotions are natural, but of course, if they get stuck and then start to become pathological, go from the neurotic to more pathological, then they can cause a lot of suffering for yourself and for everybody around you here. One of my big heroes, of course, was William Reich, one of Freud's big students, and of course, a lot of people have written on the sort of similar themes and topics between Jung and Reich. Of course, they were two big saints of the 1960s in Western culture. And what William Reich said, he was sort of the one responsible for creating bioenergetics. And it's a similar kind of thing that we hold, in particular, libido, block libidinous energy within our bodies, that these blockages then become like a character armor and then create a lot of frustration and happiness in our lives. And so we have to learn to have a proper erotic life, not just sexual life, but happiness in our life, and learn to release all these tensions and blockages within our body. Of course, Jung says a very similar thing. There's a good book I wrote showing how both of these men, these philosopher therapists, ended up showing the body itself as being a symbol of your unconscious. So Qinat Song, in the higher form, they call it global body attitude, where sort of big Qinat Song or Taoist Qigong, therapeutic Qigong healers can just look at the way your body looks like to see the imbalances within it. What does someone's body look like? How do they walk? How do they talk? How do they hold themselves? Where are the sources of tension in their body? And the tension can be about where the different organs are sort of tense, or there's blockages or fixities in them, and those specific emotions get trapped in certain parts of the body. So let's say grief in your lungs, anger in your liver, and so forth. So the global body attitude is the whole sort of universe of your body ends up showing the state of your soul, of your mind, your feelings. Your soul, whole sort of existential life story is in your embodiment, right? So William Reich and Jung say the same thing. So for me, I mean, just as an example, I have big grief issues and I'm asthmatic. I have, as my friends always see, this really, really huge middle section or rib cage, which genetically, my father, a similar thing, my grandmother as well from England, but all of us suffer from the same kind of issues, including being autistic. But over the years, I've had a lot of losses. I, personally speaking, had my own grief issues, but I've seen my rib cage even get bigger. My body start to transform and get the same kind of body you get as an asthmatic or someone with tuberculosis, where you get this giant sort of rib cage because you're trying your lung on an energetic level, your lung sort of capacity is being sort of filled up by this grief energy, that's in the metal element in Taoism. And so it's harder to breathe. So your body's expanding to get more air, more space in itself because it's being filled up by grief. It's kind of, okay, I'm working on it. But anyway, but we all have things like this. And so bioenergetics, and Alexander Lowen being one of William Reich's students, has this whole thing about how kind of therapy and massage can release these blockages. So a lot, I know this isn't revolutionary. It was revolutionary when Reich was teaching this starting in the 1930s. It's kind of like Western Qigong, the same way as osteopathy is the same. When you do that, it's a Western form of energy work and massage and energy medicine. So, this is a little bit old hat now in the 21st century because we're exposed to all these global traditions. People know a lot more, but there's still so much validity in it. And, William Reich talked about orgone energy, and that's basically just qi. I mean, that's sort of pre-natal Jing qi, that ends in, it's kind of funny because he's so, in the 1960s, like Woody Allen has it in his movies, we're making fun of the orgone accumulator, that you sit in and meditate increases your sort of orgone chi and whatever, that you have better orgasms and more happiness in your life. And then, of course, William Reich created his cloud busters, where you can shoot this chi to make it rain. And of course, it's very sad. I mean, it's a fascinating life. I mean, he was a very brave man. In Nazi Germany, he was Jewish, a psychoanalyst, and a Marxist. And I think that all he had to do was be gay, and he'd be the top Nazi hit list. But anyway, he was lucky to leave the country. But then it's very sad because he was talking about free love, and again, being a big leftist and a big Freudian, he ended up in McCarthy's America, and you can read his life story, thrown in a psychiatric institute, because of course, anyone teaching these things like universal energy, chi, having sort of free love, and finding, the energies in your body are the same as in the universe, and, having this freedom of mind and love and everything. Of course, someone who believed in those things in the 1950s in upstate New York was a complete nut and deserved to be put away in a mental institution. Very sad. But anyway, where I'm getting with this is the importance of seeing the kind of wisdom of the body. And the mind and the body go together as what Merleau-Ponty called like the body subject. We're always sort of on a Cartesian or Christian way separating these two things, but really, even in Buddhism, they go together. That's the big teaching of Tantra here. So we'll get into this. So the body and the unconscious, as Rob Preece says, are synonyms. What we need to free ourselves is held in the body. So the denial of these things in the body leads to sickness, just like I was saying. So sickness, ironically, brings us back to relationship with our bodies, with our earth and the shadow. So of course, this is the whole thing, as we've always taught in therapeutic Qigong, is that sicknesses and illnesses are a message. Your unconscious, your body trying to get your attention, that something needs, you have to outgrow something, you have to learn something, you have to face something. Sickness in the body shuts you down. It stops you from your regularly worldly projects and self-involvement to face a deeper truth about yourself, right? So the energy of sexuality, aggression, rage, oftentimes has been buried since childhood because it's too dangerous to be allowed to be expressed. So this leads to a chronic lack of vitality and power in your life, and most of all, freedom to express sexuality or emotions in intimate relationships. So, of course, if you bury these kinds of things in your body, particularly issues around, let's say, anger, grief, or sexuality, sexual desire, what happens is just like Rob Preece says. Um, in China, that song, they always teach you that it takes an enormous amount of energy in your body for your body, your nervous system, to hide things from yourself, to hide things from your own mind. And so you end up losing that. Again, William Reich and Jung both talk about this. Reich in particular, you're losing your own freedom and your own power in your life by shutting yourself down, by putting all these blockages, putting these energies in certain parts of your body or unconscious, and then locking them down to make sure that they don't come out. So literally, you become more and more rigid as you get older, as your emotional life, you're storing more and more in the attic or the basement of your body, your nervous system, all these kinds of emotional charges and feelings that you don't want to feel because they're too painful or too confusing or too upsetting. Or Freud would say even libido is the idea that you have the imaginary to hold pain away from you. You know, there's images you have to sort of lock pain away or not deal with them. But Freud also said we do this in sex because it feels good. It feels too good. Things are too filled in with pleasure, too overwhelming, or too scary that way. So they have to be sort of controlled or put into our unconscious here. So we have to reconnect with and liberate these forces of these wild, raw emotions and instincts. Is vital to being a healthy and crucial source of vitality, creativity in our own lives and in our body here. Okay? But they are frightening, overwhelming, and potentially destructive, as we know. So we are often disconnected. So spirituality is disconnected from the body and from these childhood traumas, from these feelings, because they're overwhelming, they're sad, they're scary, there's a lot of suffering, there's a lot of problems with them, right? And so in our own personal lives and even on religious traditions, we end up becoming more and more disembodied to feel safe, right? Spirituality then becomes sort of heady, sort of living from the neck up, so to speak, idealistic and ungrounded. Right. And a person who talked about this a lot was one of Trimpa's students, Reggie Ray. He did a really great book I like called Touching Enlightenment. He had a whole program on that for somatic experience. There's a lot of people teaching this now, but I remember articles he wrote in the 1990s in Shambhala Sun, where he was worried, at least in terms of the Tibet Buddhist community, that people from a Judeo-Christian background, this is even just as the internet was taking off, but of course now with our good old phones and everything, we're so disembodied from our feelings, from our body, lack of exercise, just being on our screens all the time, that we're becoming so dualistic that he was saying that our culture, people are becoming almost borderline sociopathic or even psychotic, in the sense that they'd be sort of literally become these Cartesian minds trapped in their own ideas, in their own sort of virtual presence online and so forth, literally online, like even playing video games where their body is completely cut off. So literally getting physically sick, emotionally sick because of this big split. And so Tibetan Buddhism, with all its deities and rituals and this and that, it was being engaged just only in a psychological way. And I think you could argue some ways it's more like that now than even it was 20, 25 years ago. And so it was so ungrounded as a practice. And so he decided to start teaching people very, very basic mindfulness practices to get everyone within the body, for instance, yoga and so forth. There's a lot of people doing this now. I don't think that that's particularly a revolutionary idea anymore. But I think that that's true. And so yeah, so renouncing suffering or issues in the body, as Rob Preece says, it's not about leaving the body or, of course, splitting it, getting away from it, renouncing it, but rather changing the way we relate to it and change the way we relate to our pleasures or feelings of distress or pain. And in particular, just getting past issues of aversion or attachment, which is the main thing. Buddha never, even when we're the main culprit we're looking at is always our judgmental mind, our attachment and aversion, not necessarily the things themselves. So things like food and sex and all these very natural processes of being here in the Rupa Dhatu, the sort of realm of desire that we've all taken rebirth in here, because we have this kind of karma. Those things, food, sex, going to sleep, or anything, going in the bathroom, these things aren't bad, but our attitudes or judgments towards them that lead to suffering are, right? That's what has to be looked at. And so, Tantra is about using the vital energy of the body, the emotions, as the essential ingredient to the path. Valued, not abandoned for its element. The body is valued, not abandoned for its elemental nature. So the spiritual path here in Tantra is to awaken and transform the emotional and sexual energies of the body. So what you often get is the idea that these things are like a fuel that we use to get enlightened, and that they end up being consumed in the alchemical or transformational process. So we don't have a remainder. It's not like sexual energy or anger energy, sort of our intricate judgmental mind energy. These things end up being sort of an indivisible remainder. They're sort of consumed in this alchemical process, sort of the lead that becomes gold at the end of the process. And so Tantra is a very, very special means for doing this, right? So one thing Rob Preece says, that physical exercise in the West, or we're working out, going to the gym all the time, even yoga now, is about making the body beautiful. But it does not release or transform these primordial energies within it. So the more Asian systems that you get traditionally in Persian culture, let's say, Africa, probably even in South America, those kinds of cultures, and most of all in the Asian cultures, you get South Asian cultures, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and so forth. They have all these yogic systems, martial arts, qigong, so forth, and yoga, that end up working with these energies and transforming them. So it's not just a matter like we all do in the West, of working out, doing all these to try and maintain our body the same as we are as young adults, so we keep looking beautiful and sexy in our old age. Rather than just working with the physical body, we're looking at sort of a deeper, more subtle energy body, the energies we work with. So my wife, Christina Sanchez in particular, is a big proponent of this, having been studying therapeutic Qigong and sort of women's Qigong issues for revitalization and renewal and so forth. She's been doing this for about 25 years. Very, very sort of a master practitioner and teacher of this. There's a little bit of a plug there, but this idea, in Qigong, there's a great expression in Chinese where it's like, may you remain youthful in your old age. So you're still going to look old. You're still going to have issues of this body, which is a composite phenomena, dependent arising, getting old, getting sick, and falling apart. But can I maintain the vitality I had as a youth within this body? So even if I look like an old man and have issues of getting sick and getting old, I'm still vital. I'm still happy. I'm still youthful within my body, right? Same thing with a woman. So that's sort of this tantric technology or yogic technology is about addressing that. So meditation in particular is about placing awareness back in relationship to the feelings and instincts of the body. It's about transforming emotions and feelings, but remaining in relation to them, experiencing them with clear awareness. We reconnect with the body and with feelings, not a tendency to fly into some ungrounded intellectual spirituality, but rather spirituality that allows us to acknowledge the value of our humanness, our embodiment, our compassion and acceptance, which allows us to sort of be free and to heal sort of sickness or disease within the body or within our mind. So Tantra sort of says that this energy is the vehicle to release and transform ourselves, our emotions, our sexual energy, the heart of the process of transformation. So Tantra is an intimate relationship between spiritual awakening and the body. So you can see, we in Tantra, whenever you use now, of course, because it's such a big part nowadays in our sort of more contemporary culture, sexual techniques and prostitution, all this kind of stuff. But sort of the old understanding of Tantra in Buddhism and Hinduism, maybe rather than saying sexual energy or sexuality, which you can say if you want, I like what George Bataille would say in the sense that it is eroticism or an erotic yoga, an erotic system, right? And so George Bataille, one of my sort of The philosophers defined eroticism as scenting life up until death. And what he means by that is loving life or feeling life so well and loving all things that there is a death, in this case, the death of the individual ego, right? So maybe we could look at these as in like the old Chinese, Indian, and even Greek, Greco-Roman, that are arts or arts erotica, in the sense that sort of a system of arts and crafts, so to speak, for an erotic life, and a life where we love our body, we love the world, we love people in it, we love our sort of human life that we have. And that from a tantric point of view, this is the resources and arts that we have and techniques we're going to use in order to construct our enlightenment. This, our body, so it's not just our mind, but our subtle energies of our body, our own human embodiment, is the vehicle itself that we're going to use to get enlightened. It's not just something we're going to throw in the garbage and somehow sort of separate from. You know, it's not like sort of a coarse Augustinian Christian Neoplatonism where the body is just matter, it's dark, it's evil, it's sinful, it's yucky, bleh, but really the true sort of person, higher self, whatever, is sort of separate. Like it's like literally, I'm trying to think of a better thing, but sort of be, a diamond that's been covered up by all these filthy rags that you pull off, and the diamond that's separate from the rags, here it is. Rather, it's these things go together in Tantra. That it's a lot like the Kinder Surprise, where you get a little chocolate and then there's a toy in the middle of it. Okay, the toy's your enlightenment, but technically we have to enjoy the chocolate as well. These things go together, the Kinder Surprise, or certain kinds of chocolate, or let's say a chocolate liqueur. You have the nice whiskey or something inside of it, but the chocolate is delicious as well. You sort of don't get one without the other. Okay. Now, I just wanted to say a little bit here is, again, what do we understand by the human body here in a tantric sense? Well, what our human body allows us to access is our energy body, or our soul body, or our pranic body, spirit body. There's different sort of names for it, right? So these traditions, yogic traditions, and again, you get them in Taoism, you get them in Hinduism, Buddhism, and other wisdom traditions too. I'm sure it's probably in Sufism. And I would argue that there's parts of it that you could probably find esoteric Judaism and Christianity as well, in these Hermeticism, Western Hermeticism, and so forth. Okay, so this is a new way of understanding the body. So when we talk about the body here, it's more of a form of embodiment, like a wider sense of what we understand by body. So we've got our coarse body here, and our mind, but we also, when we start looking a little closer, this coarse body leads into our energetic body, our pranic body of all the meridians and chi or prana or chakra system and so forth. So the term for energy in Tibetan Buddhism is lung, which means wind, which I always like to say one way of understanding it is, of course, wind isn't something we can really see, but you can feel it. It's windy days, stick your hand up. You're by the ocean, there's windy, so you can feel wind, but you can't see it. Now, some people can see subtle energies and see the colors and auras and so forth like that, but not everybody. Now, we've always said if you do a lot of Qigong, you can stick your hand out like that and you can see sort of a little bit of a glow. That does happen. It's happened to me. It's kind of interesting. You can see sort of somehow almost like an energy displacement. They did, I remember when I was growing up in the 70s, they had sort of photography that could capture chi and so forth. I know the Russian government did a lot of experiments with this, trying to find ways, different instruments of measuring chi. But of course, the Tibetan word, and at first it's funny because when you do Tibetan Buddhism, you talk in terms of winds. But really, that's the Tibetan word is winds, which is great. That's what we use in our tradition, but it could also be in the sort of more South Asian yogic tradition, they call it prana. And of course, in China, they call it chi. Japan, they call it ki. So there's different, we sort of, let's call it energy for us, right, in sort of English. So in Sutra, the open teachings of Buddhism, we talk in terms of primary minds and secondary minds, or mind and mental factors, or what they call in Tibetan, Lo-Ring. Once we get into talk, Tantra, we talk in terms of energies, right? Prana or Lung or Chi. So Jung says in alchemy, it's inner through energy transformation of the primordial basic material, prima materia in Latin there. This is what gets transformed into a purified state. So it's sort of in Western Hermeticism, they end up characterizing this prima materia or primordial energy or state is lead, another image or metaphor would be the devil, so to speak. Saturn, Satan, the opposer, chaos would be another thing. The instinctual basis or fundamental embodiment of our being is sort of the primary materia. It is the massa confusa, or sort of the confused, chaotic material basis that ends up being the lead that ends up being sort of transformed into gold through alchemy. It's the untamed emotional, instinctual forces that are put in the alchemical vessel at the beginning, dark forces or impurities, or the negretto, or sort of dark matter. And then the substance is dissolved, separated, coagulated, materialized, and brought into a completion state as the sort of gold, right? Which is also seen as like the philosopher's stone, just like in Hermeticism, the old alchemical books, or in a lot of fantasy books, Harry Potter, the philosopher's stone, so to speak. Also seen, sometimes metaphor seen as lapis lazuli, as sort of the medicine stone there. But the goal, of course, is to get to this lapis or gold, or the philosopher's stone. And in Hermeticism, also represented by the hermaphrodite, the male and female yin and yang energies go together to create this sort of new being, sort of which is beyond gender, so to speak. It's the unity of male and female. The Wu Qi in Taoist alchemy, sort of yin and yang. Our little yin and yang ends up going into this higher form, which is beyond all distinctions, beyond being, so to speak. Neoplatonism, we go from sort of the form of embodiment or matter into nous, or the mind, and then you ultimately go into the one, which is beyond being, because being is defined, Neoplatonism, as the thing that the mind thinks, the Platonic forms that the mind knows. These are all different. Of course, we go beyond those distinctions into the one, or the all good, or the good. Always talk about this with the two truths. We have, conventional reality, all these diversity things, dependent arisings and changes and flows and everything else on a conventional level, and then they are empty when we go to the ultimate level, right? So in a lot of ways, Tantra is about casting this process, in sort of Buddhist terms, right? Alchemical terms here. So Jung says evil, or it's the primitive state of phenomena that can gradually be freed from darkness and chaos and be brought into a refined state of gold. So good and evil, these kinds of distinctions, are stages in an evolution, a continuum of evolution. The alchemical symbol, this is spirit Mercury, or spirit of Mercury here, which is a paradoxical figure. Hermes is another one, Prometheus, these kinds of sort of metaphorical figures for this process of transformation. Mercury, of course, is carries both good and evil, light and dark within, masculine and feminine, solid and liquid, fiery and water. So Mercury has that too, even as an element. It's a metal, but it's also liquid. So we're showing the unity of these diverse things, right? So mercurial nature holds them together and shifts them from one into another. So it's a paradoxical nature that enables change to take place. So Jung says we could use these old alchemical metaphors or analogies to look at our own psychological or spiritual growth, our own spiritual path, right? So the libido, or a spirit, can be transformed alchemically in the same way. Spirit gives rise to the power of the imagination. So the substance of the psyche's imagination is a gift to create and manipulate images. So Jung says the connection between the spirit and energy mind, there's a connection there. This is just very similar to what you get in Buddhism and Hinduism this way. So Jung himself talked about sort of the unity of the mind and energy, or chi. So Tantra talks about the same thing, where we have the mind and the energies, or pranic energies, or emotions within the body here. So the three constitutional aspects: the body, the mind, and the energy body, right? The energy is the bridge. The intimate relationship of mind and energy is, for every mind there is a wind. Okay, so this is what I've talked about before. We're not going to get too much into this here, but basically, um, what Tantra wants to show, there's a great little diagram in here. Let me just see here. Yeah. Okay. In the book here is there's a diagram here where I just hold it up here for the camera here. So in this book here, what we have is there's the gross body, the subtle body, and consciousness. So the human condition with the gross body, we have issues like pain, sickness, and comfort. On sort of another level here, the subtle body experiences blocked energies, toxic energies, unbalanced energies. And then in consciousness or the mind, we have worry, confusion, fantasy thinking, busy thinking. Whereas with Buddhahood, more sort of advanced spiritual levels here, the gross body is a vehicle manifestation, which ultimately, when it becomes enlightened, becomes a nirvana kaya emanation body of the Buddhas. The subtle body is purified, blissful, and balanced. Ultimately, it becomes the beatific enjoyment body, or Sambhogakaya of the Buddhas. And finally, consciousness, the more sort of refined it gets through Buddhist practice, becomes clear and open, ultimately becomes the Dharmakaya enlightened mind of the Buddhas here. Right. So this is what ends up, I'm not going to get too much in it because then you have to study Tantra teachings and sort of get initiation, more commentary. But the point is what Tantra is it shows, ultimately it's a whole topography, a whole arts, it's a whole system of understanding, these three things, your physical body, and how it's joined to an energy body, your pranic body, and then how it's joined to the mind. So rather than having a dualistic system like you get in the West between the mind and the body, or a body and spirit, in other words, the ghost and the machine, how do these link? Ironically, what's funny is when you read in philosophy, the pineal gland is what Descartes said join mind and body. And so this is, whenever we learn this in philosophy class, everyone would laugh. Oh, it's this little gland in the brain, and somehow the mind was in there, and that this was the whole thing. How could this physical object end up impacting on a non-physical thing like the mind? How could a non-physical thing be in this one pineal gland that sort of joins the two hemispheres of the brain? Descartes, what an idiot. But really, maybe he was onto something, because the pineal gland is actually part of the endocrine system or energetic system within Chinese medicine. So there, the pineal gland, the thyroid, the lining of the heart, the pericardium, then going into the sexual organs, your sexual chakra there. And then even at the navel chakra, going in, you've got sort of the pancreas here. These are all seen as part of what they call the endocrine fire system, with the triple burner, and then the pericardium being the most important things. These regulate in Chinese medicine all your hormones. And your hormones join your mind and your body when you think about it, how you think, how you behave. And these, the seven chakras are in these seven positions. Ironically, your sexual organs, your, down here where your pancreas is, that's where your, around your sternum here. This is chakra, the lining of your heart, your pericardium is, your throat chakra, where the thyroid is, and then crown chakra, where your pineal gland is. And so this is seen as an energetic system, but also a hormonal system, which again joins the body and the mind. So maybe, by Descartes saying the pineal gland is where the mind and the body join, he was sort of talking about this more Renaissance, he sort of came out of that world, Hermetic theory, which sort of originates more in Asia. So, there might have been some truth there. But anyways, let's go back. We've got the physical body, we've got the energetic soul body or pranic body, and then you have the mind. So these things all go together. That's what Tantra teaches. So what Tantra ends up teaching is that there is sort of gradations of mind between sort of coarse conceptual minds, the more sort of subtle minds, and then finally the very subtle mind, which is just sheer awareness, or what they call clear light mind. Then there's also three levels of the body. We have the coarse body, you have the energetic body, and then we go into things like chi, sort of channels, winds, and drops, and then finally into the most subtle form of energy, or prana, which is the life supporting energy, which is in the center of your heart chakra, which supports or responsible for your movement of your most subtle-minded clear light. So that's what goes life to life to life, is this very subtle prana or energy and this very subtle mind, which is both of these things being pre-personal and anonymous. So that's what Tantra always ends up saying when we say the word Tantra, meaning thread or continuity. What is this continuity? It's the continuity of this most subtle mind and most subtle um, energy. So it's a mind and a body. These things go together, and they're the ones that transform into, the mind becomes the Dharmakaya, and the subtle energy, life supporting wind or chi or prana, becomes the Rupakaya of the Buddhas. So literally, when we talk about we have energetically this Buddha nature within us, this is from life to life to life, every situation, every moment of conscious awareness, whether you're asleep or having sex or eating, going to the bathroom, hiking a mountain, being at work, whatever you end up doing, there's always this subtle mind. There's always this subtle energy. So these things are your true body and true mind, the true Tantra. That's their life. These things are immortal. These things are your most basic forms of agency and subjectivity. But at the same time, they don't have a specific character. The karma of this specific form of embodiment or a movie that you're living right now is kind of written on them. It's kind of like in the old days, a cassette tape or a record or whatever, but they themselves, basically this subtle prana and subtle mind are just like light. It's just sheer awareness and sheer energy that end up. So this is what Tantra teaches you. Because you have this, your Buddha nature, this is what is hatching to become a Buddha. And this Buddha is always already there to begin with. This is the alchemical process of self that Tantra teaches you to use. And this is, everything takes place within these two things. So Sakya Pandita, my teachers as a Rinpoche, always quote Sakya Pandita, who says that what samsara is when you separate mind and energy, mind and prana. That dualism, this fundamental ignorance, is what creates samsara, because you end up acting karmically from the standpoint of this dualism and ignorance, self-grasping, self-cherishing, that creates the suffering world and the whole sort of limited view of ourselves that we have, the whole samsaric sense of self that we have. Once we see that these two things are together, we have the means of manifesting awareness, of enlightenment, enlightened awareness, enlightened energy right here, right now, to escape samsara. That's the nirvana that's present at every moment, because this energy and this awareness are present every moment. And that's how we end up being taught these teachings of Lung Tar, wind horse. Wherever the mind goes, energy goes. Wherever energy goes, the mind goes, like a rider on a horse. So on our little it's in my little shrine cabinet there. I've got a wind horse there, a little statue, but I'm not going to pull them out. But on the prayer flags, you always have the flying horse, the Pegasus, with jewels on his back, in the sense that the jewel, the true wealth, true happiness, true joy is carried by this Pegasus, which is our heritage, our Buddha nature, that mind and prana go together, that everything is a creation of mind, everything is a creation of energy, of prana. So this is the philosopher's stone, is the jewels on the Pegasus or wind horse's back. That's our Buddha nature. This is the true teaching of Tantra here. Where mind goes, energy goes. Where energy goes, mind goes. If the energy is polluted, the mind is polluted. If the mind is polluted, the energy is polluted. So what Tantra is, how do we refine this energy? How do we control this energy? How to refine this mind? How do we control this mind? All the arts and techniques to doing this, purifying this mind, creating this energy, refining this energy, directing this energy, projecting this mind as a positive, loving, joyful thing. And the energy will follow. Creating this purified, wonderful, joyous energy, and the mind will follow. Right? And that's what Tantra is. That's technically what the 4 classes of Tantra teach. Okay, I think that might be it. Let me just see if I got anything on the last page. It's all sort of my notes, but that's sort of what I wanted to teach on here. So I like this. The body energy, when mind radically transformed, human limitations can be transcended because the extraordinary powers and abilities given by a purified energy body and the mind as well. Yes, and then, oh, I forgot. This is actually really good because, of course, Jungian psychotherapy has a lot on dream work, working. I have a whole book on that, which is just absolutely fantastic. And dream world and our fantasy or imagination. So technically, what we'll get to is we need, for instance, Tantra ends up teaching that your whole, but like what I think is important is that what Tantra teaches when you look at prana is that we start to understand more that everything is a function of energy. Everything is energy. Everything is vibration. So once we start doing Tantra, our physical body, we start understanding it in more subtle ways. We start seeing that our physical body shows us, really, the more we start practicing, that everything is just a manifestation of energy, in particular these subtle energies, which are a manifestation of five root pranas or five elements, and that the world itself is a reflection of that. That the five elements in the world, all the energies in the world are the same as the elements within myself or energies in myself, and vice versa. And so all these energies are the sort of subtle pranas, subtle chi within our body and in the chakra system, everything else. This is what allows us to have even a very physical, coarse body that has the five senses, for instance, that allows us to eat and digest and go to sleep and so forth. But it more than anything, it allows us to have these pranas, allows us to be able to have imaging, to be able to have dream life and the imaginary. Just like I've taught in all my sutra teachings here, the more we study the sort of sutric teachings of Buddhism with the three principal paths, studying emptiness and conventional reality, we see that everything is the imagination. Prana allows us to be able to have an imagination and allows us to be able to dream when we're awake, dream when we're asleep. It allows us to be able to control the whole imaging system of our sort of subtle mind, our subtle body, and so forth. So, Jung teaches us to do alchemy through his psychotherapy using images. Basically, we have energy and we have the imagination. These things, two things go together. Same thing in Tantra. We have subtle energies and we have the mind, right? The sort of power of the imagination, all the energy of the imagination, and how the imagination is in all the energy. And we have our dream state. A big part of Tantra that we see is working with sleep yoga and dream yoga. And what we see is for higher practices, the world we end up living in becomes more of a shamanic world of images, the imagination, and dreaming. We start to see that everything is a projection of the mind, so everything is like a dream. Everything is the imagination. We end up sort of breaking down the distinction between dreaming and reality. Right? We start to see what's the difference between being asleep and being awake. What's the difference between dreams and our day-to-day life? If everything's a product of the imagination, if everything is energy, it's just the deploying of the mind externally. Everything is, again, just the imagination and energies. What kind of energies? A whole topography, what Jodalas would call kind of like the transcendental field of all these different feelings and sensations and conceptual creations. Everything is just like a dream. Everything is just different kinds of energies, right? And from a Buddhist point of view, what is that? Well, we end up seeing the union of energy and the imagination that brings the sort of end result is the creation of the beatific body or the angelic body of the Buddhas, right? The body of visions, right? And how do we do this? In and through mantra. What Tantra, another word for it, is secret mantra, right? Mantras are secret mantras, are spells. A mantra is the vibration, the mind and energy of a Buddha. When we work with mantras, we end up, again, if everything from a Madhyamika Prasangika point of view is labeled by the mind, everything is grammar, everything is how we speak and use language. Our conceptual life ends up creating the world we end up living in. From the verb, from the God is the verb, from God speaks the world, so to speak, even in the Old Testament. Right? Mantra is how we create things just through our conceptual life and our language. But from a magical point of view, we end up creating the mandala of the deity with mantra. Mantra is a vibration, it's a seed syllable, but it's also the figure and form of the deity itself. So it's sound, vibration, energy, and form, vision, image, right? So that's how we end up creating the mandala of the deities. We're in the diluted mandala right now of samsara. Through tantric technology of mantra, we are able to create these purified worlds of the Buddhas. And that's why in Japanese Buddhism, I like tantric Buddhism, they call it shingon, or magic word. They call it magic, miku, magic, sort of the hidden secret magic of Buddhist practice, tantric practice. And it's the same thing when we talk about casting spells, spelling the language, spelling the words, speaking the words, right? The magic of language, the magic of mantra. So there we go. That's in that this is all you to be able to work with mantra at the end when you do advanced tantric practice is what they call Vajra recitation. We end up sort of just understanding these words of mantras in terms of energies or vibrations, where you're doing mental recitation. You're just feeling the energies of these mantras within your subtle body. So again, that's how we're tying, language, words, images, and energy together, all along the backdrop or sort of projected on the mind, in and through the mind. Okay, that's enough. My goodness. There we go. So again, this is just an introduction. And you'll, again, like I said, just like reading books on sports, reading books on food, reading books on sex, you can do that all you want, good for you. But how we really experience these things is by doing them. So I can just give you a big talk on here in subtle energies and pranayama and qigong and mantras and so forth. You won't really know what any of this is about until you start doing the practice yourself, and the proof is in the pudding. So my Lama Zazen Rinpoche always says, like in sutra, it's all debate, intellectual stuff, answers, contemplation, working it all out. Tantra, the answers you're looking for come through the practice itself, almost on a magical or intuitive level. So it is a little bit different. It's magical, it's intuitive. So I can talk about all this stuff, but you won't know to actually do tantric practice yourself, to get the initiation and commentary and start doing the practice. May it be so. So mote it be. Let us dedicate all of this for the enlightenment and liberation of all sentient beings. Okay, see you next time.